So you know what I was thinking about? You know how when you do something ironically and you do it so much and ends up becoming sincere? Have you also ever heard of this thing called the Perpetual Agony machine? That's what irony becoming sincere reminds me of. I should explain what that is. The Perpetual Agony machine is a wheel that sits in front of you with your legs underneath it, your arms on the side of it, and it stretches out your limbs, your entire body, torso and all, and you can't stop it either. The momentum forces you to keep spinning the wheel with your arms until you're stretched so thin you become part of the machine. Now, I'm reminded of this because a lot of the stuff we watch tends to spin their wheels too, so to speak, like a long running show, like South Park, for example. And like you may know, South Park has always used satire to poke fun at and reveal the underlying ridiculousness of worldly problems. But what happens when a show predicated on satire spins its wheels for so long, it becomes the very joke it sought to make fun of. Because in order to perform satire, you must do the action. You can't fake the literal aspect. It's happening even if it's ironic. Just like how you can't get on the the agony machine ironically and just jump off because you're hooked. Just like audiences when they witness the admittedly good satire of the creators, right? And with that hook, the audiences need more. But now you have the momentum, remember? The wheel can't stop spinning. And so consequently, the substance of the show gets stretched thin, just like the body is stretched thin, and both eventually become part of the machine. The body a machine for agony, and the show a machine for ignorance. Repetition is literal, and metaphors are invisible. You perform the same ignorance so much it feels natural, and when you present it to the world, how does it appear any different from the genuine ignorance? It doesn't, especially in this climate. Because think about this, right? When South Park first started, its crude and vulgar nature made its satire obvious because politics used to be serious and boring to people. The exaggeration became obvious through the contrast. But now that crudeness and vulgarity isn't an exaggeration anymore. Real life is genuinely that lowbrow now, and it has been for close to a decade or so. And since real life has become that exaggeration, the show now only perpetuates that same lowbrow ignorance, and instead of satirizing it, it became the agony machine. But this can also kind of explain why people being made fun of by these shows end up liking them. It's because the shows resemble their real life now, so it's become representation for them, a slice of life, a slice of their life. This exact same idea extends from beyond the macro and into the micro. That would be you and me, individuals who happen to have friends, or may happen to have friends. But here's the thing. If you have friends, quote unquote, who say or perform racist, misogynistic, sexually violent, anything like that, remember, there is no functional difference between performing hatred and performing hatred, regardless of if it's ironic or not. Like, if someone stabbed you as a joke, they still stabbed you. You're bleeding, and you're not going to take that back. They're definitely not going to either. Right? So, just like the show, it's not a joke if it's real. Don't become the agony machine, and don't let your friends do it either. And it's important not to, because we make up the wider world, so if the wider world becomes the satire, becomes the hyperbole, becomes the parody, it's because we let it happen. But the inverse is true as well. We can stop it from happening too. We are always the solution to worldly problems, as people and as a united collective. But if that collective is saying slurs, then what do you think the wider world is going to be made up of? Right? It's going to be people that resemble South Park characters in the modern day. You can't let them like slide it past you either and cover it up as just a joke. There's such a thing as comedically stated truths. It's when someone says something under the guise of under the guise of a joke that they truly do believe. Now, you probably heard this in other forms like Schrodinger's douchebag or it's funny because it's true. You've definitely heard the same idea just with a different name. Now, repetition is literal. You can only do things so much before they either become real or they're revealed to have always been real. If something is truly a joke, keep this in mind. If something is truly a joke and it comes from a terrible place or it results in terrible things, they should just be able to stop. They aren't on the Perpetual Agony machine. The showrunners, they have some sort of plausible deniability there. They have an incentive to continue making the show. Their momentum for the Agony machine is the viewership. But regular people, individuals, your friends, they don't have that momentum yet. So for them to choose, if they do, to justify their ability to say a slur or to justify their ability to threaten somebody with sexual violence, that's when they've jumped on the Perpetual Agony machine. That's when they've committed to it. Their momentum is now the precedent that they've set for themselves. This is something they desire to say despite the harm it causes. They have now become part of the machine of ignorance, the machine that perpetuates violence against others, because words do hold weight. Which is why I say there's no difference between performing ignorance and performing ignorance, or performing hatred and performing hatred. You're still doing the thing. And when you give power to the thing by doing it, you encourage others who already truly believe it to do it. Because repetition is literal and intentions are invisible. Speaking of intentions, you have to wonder, why do they desire to say these things? What makes them funny? It's the only direct question you need to ask. What's funny about sexual assault? And now, while you wait for them to give you an answer, we also have to consider, why is this important in the first place? I bet that's what you're wondering if you're listening at this point. It's important because, like we said, we make up the world, and even as individuals, the things we do curate the world that we exist in. So if we exist in a world that's predicated on dehumanization, vulgarity, and general crudeness, especially the dehumanization, and then violence on top of it, what do you get? You get a world where it's no surprise that people are dehumanized and abused. Verbal violence is always the first step into physical violence. Verbal violence gives way to physical violence. The pen isn't mightier than the sword just because words have substance. The pen is mightier than the sword because the pen influences who the sword goes into. Who the sword goes into. And that's why that's important. Also consider this. You may be of the identity where that violence, that violent rhetoric, the pen, the words, are targeted towards. If you have friends who say these things to you, if they're comfortable enough with the idea of violence against you or people that look like you, how can you be sure you can truly trust them? Being comfortable with the idea of violence requires you be complicit in the thought of it as well. Now, you may say, but he, she would never lay a finger on me. They would never let anyone lay a finger on me. Consider the fact that the majority of violent assaults of any kind happen between people that already know each other. Also consider how people you know are more likely to be rude to you than they are to a complete stranger, for the most part. Why do you think that is? It's not because you spend more time together, that's for sure. There's a level of familiarity and comfortability someone needs to have in order to even consider those thoughts. There's relational prerequisites that come into play that allow those thoughts and then those actions to take form. And that applies also to the targeted violent rhetoric as well. Those prerequisites being a lack of boundaries and a complacency with that violence. There's no person on earth that will threaten you with violence if they're not okay with it in some capacity. Their own morality should not even let them utter the word out of them. Now, how do people even become comfortable with this violence in the first place? Art imitates life, but that life creates the art. You can end up with a chicken and egg scenario. Either real life itself can become so lowbrow that the media we consume and is created is also lowbrow, or the media is lowbrow and then the people are in the society. That's why stuff like that, like South Park, running on for too long, stretching itself thin, Agony machine is also important to prevent from happening. Because what do they do in South Park now? They never upped the ante of the satire, so it's perpetuating pre-existing lowbrowness, but that lowbrowness consists of dehumanizing language and slurs. That's how people end up becoming comfortable with that. And if they see that it's able to be put on TV, if they see that it's on TV in their heads, if they're okay with watching it, why wouldn't they be okay with seeing it too? You got to keep your friends in check. And as a consequence, we keep the art in check as well. Because if they themselves go on to create, they won't create things that perpetuate violence. Or if they don't create, they won't consume anything or support anything that perpetuates violence. And that gives less incentive to create such lowbrow art that resembles the lowbrow reality. Because trust me, I'm well aware that those shareholders are a proponent of why this stuff exists in the first place. Why it has funding to exist in the first place. Can never forget about those guys. And speaking of art imitating life, not to say he's art, but think about our president. Our president perpetuates violent rhetoric as well. But who gives him the power of rhetoric? PR teams, public relations. Writing is still art. Writing for speeches is definitely an art form, and they give him the power to do so. Who makes up society? Individuals. Individuals with friends. Keep your friends in check. If they ever go on to be PR people, there's less of a chance they'll be willing to sell out and write monstrous ideals for a monster of a human being. And like other art forms, they'll be less likely to listen and support it. And we've seen plenty of people listen to and support his violent rhetoric and go on to act out. The pen told the sword who to stab. And that's exactly what they've been doing. Innocent people, legal people, harmless people, hardworking people, and generally beneficial people. Never forget that the whole point of a society is for the collective benefit of everyone in it. Everyone. Now, the last thing I have to mention is the furthest extent that this violent rhetoric and dehumanization and normalization of it, comfortability with it, can take us. It takes us to the most profitable industry under capitalism. And that is war. Forever wars. Think about it. In a society that normalizes violent language towards itself and dehumanizes people within it, they'll be way more willing to do it to other people outside of that society. It just makes it easier. They've already been trained to do it. They've already been trained with the idea of in groups and out groups. They've already been taught to treat it with a lack of seriousness because the satire condones it. The agony machine. That's the furthest extent it takes us. That's the furthest extent it has taken us. That's why we have forever wars and perpetual and a lot of American imperialism. It starts with what you get comfortable with, what you don't do, and then what you do. So the better you keep your friends in check, the better you're aware of the art you consume and digest relative to the society you're in, the less likely it is you end up joining everyone else on the human centipede of agony machines. Stay frosty. I don't think I have anything else to say, and this is where I bid you adieu. Auf Wiedersehen. And thank you for listening.